Welcome to CNN Talk with me, Hannah Vaughan-Jones, in for Max today. Now, parts of the world right now are being divided by a single piece of fabric. It's one that covers the face of some Muslim women, taking the form of either the burqa or the niqab. And that is raising issues about how much of your face you need to show to be an accepted member of society. The former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson compared women who wear burqas to bank robbers and letterboxes, even though he doesn't support the Danish law. So our question today, is it right to ban the burqa? Please do join the conversation on Facebook, facebook.com/CNN International. Send us your comments. In particular, if you are wearing some kind of face veil or face covering, we would love to hear from you as well, given the fact that obviously on the panel here today, we're going to have a very full discussion, but obviously none of us are wearing any kind of face veil or anything like that, so it would be great to hear your perspective. So let's kick things off just by, we've got in the question, is it right to ban the burqa? But we're not just talking about burqas, and we should perhaps just explain the difference between the various face coverings. So you've got the burqa there on the far left, which is the full covering with the face grate, I suppose, over the eyes as well. Niqab in the middle and the hijab on the far right as well. Nema, to you first. Should we ban it?
I'm sorry, I'm still just exhausted with rage at Boris Johnson. I mean, this is a man who has never met a dog whistle he has been able to avoid. And for him to say letterboxes, do we really need Boris Johnson to explain to women, I mean, his moral pulse on this?
Well, let's kick off then with Boris Johnson and what he has said. This is the column that he wrote for the Daily Telegraph there. The lovely Danes have got it wrong. A burqa ban is not the answer. So theoretically, at least, he's agreeing sort of with you in that
he manages to agree while ticking every single box to enrage, but also to give the right kind of dog whistles to his base.
Right.
And I think that analysis is exactly right. Language in this area, I know, having worked in newspapers, people get things wrong, and he can't help himself. He's an absolute fan of his own exuberance. He's a fan of his own linguistic ability and voice. So you can see him writing it. You can see his tongue poking slightly out of his mouth as he writes it, because he thinks he's come up with a glib and winning phrase. The argument, the overarching argument, the liberal argument, which is that it is wrong for the state to ban items of clothing, seems to me to be a perfectly reasonable one for him to get to. But along the way, he's trying to do all sorts of other things at the same time.
He's trying to reassure people that he's still just racist enough.
But we should call this what it is.
Enough.
You know, this guy, the guy that was on screen who said, I'm against political Islam. You know, this is another example of what's happening in Europe and what Donald Trump trades on. This is ethno-nationalist panic.
That debate about the merits of Orthodox religion, which you can, with clean hands, say is morally questionable.
But how ironic.
So let's have that debate. So the issue here isn't about Orthodox religion, is it? It's about women's agency. So when you presume that that woman who has covered her face is covering her face because a man has told her to, then you're taking away her agency. It may or may not be true.
I totally agree with that. There seems to be there's either she has full agency herself, either she's being overtly compelled, or she may have been conditioned in her growing up, the culture that she's grown up in, to feel a certain way. And that itself is a spectrum.
But how outrageous, how outrageous to assume, as Nema says, that a woman has lost her agency because of what she's wearing. Most guys have no idea what women wear.
I just want to point out as well that the majority of the comments that we're getting from our viewers are very much in support of a ban. Craig says, yes, it's a threat to national security. TJ says everyone's face should be visible. The face covering is depersonalizing, antisocial and backward. Angelica says, absolutely, yes. Why is it that some people are allowed to cover their faces in public?
But who is, I mean, sorry, Nina, go ahead.
I think there is a legitimate debate to be had about whether or not burqas are a good thing or a bad thing. So I know we've talked about female agency, and I think that we've said that you can't assume that females are being denied their agency if they wear a burqa or niqab. But this is an argument that's not only been had in Western liberal democracies, it's been had in many Muslim societies over the decades. So I don't think you can say that it's not controversial or problematic, not only in our societies, but even in Islamic societies.
Someone pointed...
Nonetheless, the question is, should the state ban it?
That I grew up around women in veils. I was educated by them. Nobody rushed out in the street to stop them. Nobody rushed inside of a convent. These women lived together. They were isolated from society. Nobody rushed up. And you know why? Because they were Christian.
But I'm not condoning it. No, but I'm not condoning it on our side.
saying you are.
But what I'm saying saying is there is a progressive liberal argument, but when it comes particularly to the burqa ban, it's undeniable that it's been co-opted by the far-right populist movement in Europe.
Yeah.
We've seen these parties making it an issue.
And why
an
is the
electoral-
question? See, that's the
but
question.
It brings together an unholy alliance. You have the populist far-right, and then you actually have real progressive and feminists also making the argument as to why it's something that's up for debate. So it's nuanced.
Sorry.
I just want to mention Sonia's written in to say, I don't believe in imposing a burqa ban. It is their religious costume. In a democracy, we respect that.
And I think one of the great tragedies in modernity, actually, is how France has pursued a policy which, at one level, we might... I'm an atheist. I believe in secularism to a certain extent. And France has this policy of laïcité, which is the idea that the state should have no role with religion. And at one level, you think, that's good, that's giving freedom. But how it's manifested in France is the very opposite of liberty, because you have an orthodox state effectively saying to people, you can't wear that, you can't behave that way. And France has a huge problem in how it ghettoises Muslims. Its prisons are absolutely absurdly full of Islamic people because the state itself is prejudiced against them.
Speaking of France, Emmanuel Macron is quoted as saying the following. This is on face veils, not just on the banning of any kind of, like, religious necklaces and the like. I am not especially happy that some Muslim women choose to wear the headscarf when out in public, but it must be tolerated. I respect veiled women, but I want to make sure that they are wearing veils and headscarves out of personal choice, which kind of comes back to the argument of, if the government is going to get involved, should it, instead of banning the burqa, should it ban the insistence on wearing a burqa?
Absolutely, rather than
criminalise
criminalise the women. What I find incredibly painful as someone who is both a practicing Muslim and a feminist is the fact that progressives are happy to be in this unholy alliance, that they are happy to espouse beliefs that are held by ethno-nationalists and the far right, because in a way they think there's a racism there. They think they know what's best for us.
I have a genuine question for Nema, which is, we are talking about how we're saying how, you know, you're basically taking away women's agency by saying you're being forced into this. But what about, undeniably, there will be some women who are being forced into it, who don't have agency and don't have a voice. So how do you start talking about
you go
those
into
women?
the, well, so as we saw, when you ban the burqa, as you rightly pointed out, women don't leave their homes. So open up these communities, go into these communities, allow yourself to have open lines of communications with them. But when you speak about women as if they're covering their head because they're ill-educated, or they're covering their head because they've been told to do so by men, then already you're alienating them. I mean, if I find it alienating...
No, absolutely. So
No, but
for those women who are being forced to cover their head, should the state have shelters for them? Or, I mean, how should we start talking about
Well, see, this is why people like Boris Johnson enrage me so much, because he is part of a political party that has done more to slash funding for women's shelters than any other government in the UK's history. So the hypocrisy of someone like him speaking out, what you should do is you should provide women with those kind of resources. If you are being... I mean, I find nothing more terrifying than seeing 6- and 7-year-old girls with hijab, because I think that's indoctrination, and that's appalling, and it also sends the most awful message about what we think about children's bodies.
But lots of grown women will have been 6- and 7-year-olds and will have been indoctrinated.
Absolutely. So in schools, you know, you need to start reaching out to these girls in non-aggressive, non-antagonistic ways.
And the tragedy of this is that one must be entitled to criticise all forms of organised religion in how it influences people's thinking. You know, the history of the world in many ways is the history of the errors of religious thinking and the way it's been imposed on people. There needs to be freedom to do that. But once the liberal argument is contaminated by illiberal thinking, and France is kind of like the poster nation for that,
and ignorance,
it becomes impossible to even have a reasoned debate, so you lose on both sides.
So if your eyes are completely covered, and obviously the rest of your face is completely covered as well, can you still be an active citizen?
I think that's a really good question. But I think that, so we're talking about different degrees. So when you're talking about the burqa, then I think it's incredibly difficult for women to contribute meaningfully. But then if you're talking about the face veil, yes. I mean, when people talk about national security, in Saudi Arabia, which I've lived in, women are told to show their faces at airports, when they're driving. I mean, there are very simple fixes. If you want to include women in society, there are very simple fixes.
The security thing always seems like...
I mean, I'm always like, well, so should nobody ever wear a motorcycle helmet going down the street? Well,
yeah, exactly. I mean, actually, Jack Straw, who's a former foreign secretary here in the UK, there was a huge uproar at the time because I think in his constituency he said he wouldn't meet with his constituents.
Well, Boris repeated it in the article.
And Boris repeated it again in his article on the weekend.
Because he said he found it distracting.
So, yeah, Jack Straw said, yes, this is it, the value of a meeting as opposed to a letter or a phone call is so that you can, where is it? So it's so that you can see what the other person means and not just hear what they say. So he would ask any women who attended his MP's surgery, rather, to remove their veils once they were one-on-one with him, which sounds fair enough, doesn't it? I mean, in terms of if you're going to be an active citizen and engage with someone else,
No.
should they not be able to have eye contact with you?
Well, so if a woman was wearing a see-through top, would he ask her to cover her breasts so that he wasn't distracted by them? I mean, you don't get to... You are there to give her a service. You are her MP. If she has chosen to present herself in this way, then you just get on with it. You do your job and you move on.
But, OK, so is the niqab or burqa, is it an item of clothing? Is it a fashion statement in terms of a choice?
I think it's two different things.
Because, I mean, you know, a lot of people would say that these kind of items of clothing are gender-specific. You're defined first and foremost as a woman before you're defined as a human being.
Well, I think women are... I mean, that's one of the horrible things about being a woman. You are defined by how you present yourself, however it is you present yourself. But we're talking... There are two different issues with niqab. One is some women wear it because they genuinely do want to withdraw from the world. It's almost like becoming a nun. They don't want to... They have decided that their understanding of their faith is that they don't want to present in any way sexually. They do actually want to completely eradicate that individuality. They have made that decision. Some women wear it because it's an identity, and you see that with hijab as well. You see women who are wearing hijab in very colourful ways, in ways that perhaps don't reflect the more traditional understanding of hijab as being very loose and modest.
But the underlying theology there is problematic, isn't it?
Yeah.
The notion that you don't want to be an individual, your hair is somehow a sort of sexualized thing. That itself doesn't feel like an issue that we want to just accept passively.
No, but that's your interpretation of it. So the Quran actually doesn't prescribe any of these things.
For me, I find it troubling in the fact that you're literally making yourself invisible as a woman. So for that reason, I think there needs to be debate about whether or not this is acceptable in a society where we think men and women are equal.
This is ethno-nationalist panic. Now, we can use all sorts of questions about, oh, we don't like, you know, women are being oppressed or they're doing this and that. Women have our dress is oppressive, all right? Most of us in some...
Makeup is oppressive.
Come on.
And no one is seriously saying, I don't think, these countries that are banning burqas are doing it solely for correct reasons
Yes,
that
come
are well
on.
thought through.
They would argue they're doing it for security reasons, and lots of our viewers have been saying that this is a security risk. The burqa is a security threat.
So is a hoodie.
But a woman walking down the street, going about her normal life, free in a free society to pursue what she wants to pursue, is not a security risk.
The irony for
France
me
is a
is that
big
I'm probably the only person here who grew up in a country where I was told what to wear.
Yeah.
I grew up under Islamic law in Sudan, and it is the most humiliating thing you can do to a woman. Having strange men pull you out from the middle of a crowd and tell you that you are inappropriate
Exactly right.
is the most appalling thing anybody can do to you. And so it's just, I find it bonkers that I'm the one sitting here arguing why women should have the right to do this, because I know how dehumanizing it feels when strange men believe that they have the right to legislate for what we can and can't do as women.
We've had such a fantastic debate on this, and the conversation continues on Facebook if you've been watching us there. Thank you so much for all of your comments. Keep them coming as well, and we'll try and get back to you on them. You can also listen, rather. I keep saying watch. You can listen to today's show on a podcast. Our podcast is available on your favourite provider as well. Just search for CNN Talk there. You can also watch all the previous shows as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you.